Hello, buddy. This is Purge bringing you guys a much requested Dota 2 fantasy guide. This is something I've been pretty interested in the last 2 or 3 major events, and I wanted to tell you guys everything I knew about it so that hopefully you can get interested in it as well. One important thing is that if you guys do have highly level compendiums, you should have a lot of good player cards because there's a lot of drops like premium player cards and other things as you level up. So to get there, go to your compendium, move on over, and then you're going to have to choose player cards to start yourself out. Now, there's a ton of players in the game or in the tournament because of there being 18 teams, and the best thing to do is to open all of your packs and get as many of the best cards as you can and dust the ones that you don't want. Now, how do you know which ones you don't want? Well, the easiest way to do that is to kind of check to see what kinds of things you get for the points. So the easiest way to check that is go to fantasy, and then you can pull out this little box on the left side which shows you how this works. You open player card packs, you put them in your fantasy roster, which is this screen, and then you score fantasy points based on how those players play during the days that they play at TI. So it's pretty straightforward. And then depending on how well you do, you get battle points. For example, last year at the Kiev Major, I ended up placing really well. It said I was in the 100th percentile. I think I was slightly outside the top 200 globally in terms of fantasy. So it means I did pretty well. It is important that you need to pick your fantasy players for every single day, and you can't forget, because if you forget to put your cards in, then you don't get points. So that can be a big mistake. So there's 4 days of group stage where you have to choose different players for every day. Then you have 6 days of the main event as well as the grand finals day over here, which is really important. So you can basically choose which cards you want from whichever role you want, and it's separated by roles: 2 for cores, 1 for offlane, and 2 for the 2 supports. And they're all scored the same way. It's just the expected outcomes are slightly different. So this is the important thing here, is the scoring stats. Although we could also look at rewards. That part's pretty cool, right? If you get top 10%, you get 16 levels. If you get top 25%, you get 8 levels. And if you get top 50%, you get 4 levels. It's extremely easy to get top 50%. I pretty much guarantee that if you put in player cards of players that are playing for every single day and you don't forget to submit any day, then you will guaranteed get top 50%. Because what happens is a lot of players will show up, they'll put in fantasy for a day or two, and then they'll forget, and then once they forget, they stop trying because they think, oh, I lost a day, there's no way I can make it. If you put player cards in for at least like 80% of the days, you will probably get top 50%. So this is super easy battle points if you guys are trying to push yourself into a big upgrade. So that's just for overall player base of the people that participate. And let's take a look at the scoring stats. So this is the important thing. You get 0.3 fantasy points per kill that a player gets. You guaranteed get 3 points for deaths, but every time the player dies, they lose 0.3 points. That means if you die 10 times, you get 0 points for deaths. But if you die less than 10 times, you will get points here. You get a tiny amount of points for last hits and denies. You get a tiny amount of points for GPM. You get 1 point for killing Tower. You get 1 for killing Roshan. You get 3 points automatically for team fights, but as if you are not in a fight, your percentage in a team fight goes down. So the higher amount of team fights that you participate in gives you a higher amount of that 3 points, kind of similar to deaths in that way. So team fights is a pretty good stat. Every observer ward you place, you get 0.5 points. 0.5 points for every camp you stack. 0.25 points for every rune you take or bottle. So that would be bounty runes, double damages, stuff like that. And if you get a first blood, you get 4 points. And then for a second of stun, you get 0.05 points. So that probably looks like a different language to you guys. You probably don't know what it actually means. Well, the best way to look at it is to use third-party websites. You can do things like go into Dota replays and watch matches. Like, for example, I could go to the watch tab, I could go to tournaments, I could scroll down and click Kiev, I could find a match and think, oh yes, let's look at this match detail, and then go to the scoreboard. But I don't know if fantasy is included here, and I don't think it is, unfortunately. So that basically means that it's difficult to track fantasy points unless you load the replay and skip towards the end of the game and check how many fantasy points. There are some things that you can look at, like for example, how many kills the players get, how many deaths, what is their GPM like. The most valuable one is probably how many wards did they place and who places the wards. For example, if I run Jerax and he only places 3 wards, it possibly would have made more sense if I played Fly as my fantasy because he places 10 wards, and I know this is 5 fantasy points and this is only 1.5, for example. So the warding stuff is the most informative, but generally I recommend that you guys stick to third-party websites to be able to track this stuff. So to do so, there's a couple websites I really recommend. This is the main one. This is Cyborg Matt's. I'm sorry, this is Liquipedia. Excuse me. This is Cyborg Matt's fantasy prize tracker website. I believe it's his. I might be misinformed, but I'm pretty sure this is correct. You have a limited amount of time to submit your picks for day one. So if you guys are watching this video and the next day, I strongly recommend you go into the Dota client and you put players in. Knowing which players to play is still something we'll cover later, but let's talk about the actual meat of what this website does. If you click on a different tournament that was tracked, for example, Kiev would be the most recent, you can go to fantasy scores overall and look at averages, and that's what I wanted to look at. So if I click averages, it'll open me up to this website, which shows the average scores. So it shows that Abed is the highest scoring fantasy player on average. And we want to get some really interesting information. So what we should do is we should look at every single category. So let's get a kind of feel about how many points you actually get for each of these different categories, because it's very important. Abed gets a lot of points for kills, 2.5 on average, 2 for deaths. He gets 0.9 for CS, which is pretty low. I'd like to point out that like Sumail has 1.4. So if we look at who gets the most, Sumail gets the most points from creep score in the entire game. But again, we want to look at average scores. We'll go back to Abed here. You can click on these to look at least and highest, by the way. So he gets not too many from CS. His GPM, he gets 1.1. Tower kills, he gets 2.3 per game on average. Roshan kills, 0.4 per game. Team fight, 2.1. Wards placed, he places very few wards, stacks not that many camps, grabs quite a few runes. This is a decent amount of points. First blood, stuns. So the important thing to look at is to think, where does Abed get most of his points from? And it looks like, surprisingly, stuns is the biggest one. Now, this will change. It depends a lot on what heroes Abed plays during the tournament, what heroes are popular during the meta, and whether or not another player on his team might play that hero instead. So there's some heroes that can really abuse this stat, for example, because some things are classified as stuns while others aren't. Like, I think Searing Chains on Ember Spirit counts as a stun, surprisingly. Frostbite on Crystal Maiden might as well. So sometimes there's outliers. Like, if there's a player that only plays Ember Spirit the whole tournament, he might get a lot of points from stuns, but he might not do well. So you have to take into account which players are going to have the best individual performances. Abed has an extremely good individual performance because he's a 10k player, naturally. The teams that win games are usually going to get more points because the teams that are winning are going to have more kills, fewer deaths, higher GPMs, more tower kills, Roshans, all of this stuff basically. The teams that play longer games are usually going to have more points. Yes, they will die more, so their death points will be lower, but they'll get more kills because the games will be longer. Their creep score will go up because they will play longer games. Like, Sumail has an extra 170 creeps per game killed. But DC lost earlier in the tournament, so they probably played less games and maybe got eliminated faster in the games they lost, for example. So there's a lot of things like that that you can look into. So games, long games that are played is a big factor. The individual performances, you can think of the play style of the teams as well. Which teams are more likely to cover their mid player over their carry, for example. DC is definitely one of them because Abed's so good, and Mason usually plays sort of like defensive, solo, reliable carries. Like, he'll play Juggernaut, I believe. I've definitely seen him play a lot of Weaver, heroes that the supports can just leave and leave that guy to his own devices, and he won't die too many times, which allows them to protect Abed, get Abed more kills, let Abed accelerate. So this basically shows you that, according to Kiev, Abed was the highest average scorer across the board for all of your days. But it is important to remember, Abed wasn't playing in the grand finals. So that means if we hop back into Dota 2, and we go back to, I'll just go the way that I know. Go here, Battle Pass, Compendium, and then Fantasy. So if Abed's not playing on the grand finals, it's obviously not going to be worth putting him down as a core. So you have to adjust things like that. The other stuff that's really important is who's the highest scoring for each of their roles. So Abed and Sumail will generally get more points because they get more last hits, they get more GPM, they generally get tower kills, they generally get Roshan kills because they have more damage, they generally get hero kills because they have more damage. Supports can't really compete with that in the same way. Unless you're Kaka. Kaka gets an insane amount of fantasy points on average. Gets a disgusting amount of runes grabbed, for example. He gets a ton of points from wards, which a core would never place. So there are some players that can get comparative, but let's, for example, look at supports. The easiest way to do this is to put it either way. So we are at supports right now. Kaka has the most scoring on average as a support. So if Newbie is playing, it might be really worth running Kaka as one of your supports. Boboko got the second most on average for the games that he played. Solo is very good because he places a lot of wards. And that's another important thing to look at, is how many people, who actually places the wards on the team. I talked about that a little bit in the client, but an easier way to do that is actually on Dotabuff. So you can go over to Dotabuff, and let's say the player we're looking at. Let's look at Solo, for example. So we'll look for Virtus Pro. I'm going to click on Virtus Pro here. It's going to pull up their page, and then what we can do is, they have a pig. We can look at some of their recent games played. So I can just go here. I can click to open in a new window for a few of these, and then I can see who placed the most wards in the game. So if we just go to their page and I scroll down, boom, Solo plays 16 wards, Lil played 2. So what you can do is look at who places them, what heroes they're on. If I know that VP is going to play a lot of Lich, for example, then I can generally guesstimate that Solo's always going to place most of the wards. In this game, if we could look, actually this game, Lil placed 14 wards. So this is slightly counteractive to our data. That means that if a VP is playing a lot of Bounty Hunter, for example, which he obviously placed them because he's a Bounty Hunter, if VP plays a lot of Bounty Hunter, then I may want to pick Lil over Solo more often for fantasy. What about in this game over here? Who placed all the wards on their team? It was mostly Solo. He placed 14 wards on Dazzle, and Lil only placed 1. So you can look at some of the team's history, see who places the wards. That's the most important thing you can do when you're looking at differences between their mid, their carries, and their supports, is that you need to see which one on average places more wards, because almost always they're going to have the higher stats for the team. In terms of fantasy tracking. So that's probably why Solo is all the way up here at 8.3. If we scroll down and find where Lil is, he's all the way over here, and wards placed. He actually only gets 0.6 points. He places 1.1 wards on average per game at Kiev. So that means Lil would have been a much worse fantasy player to use over Solo, because Solo placed him way more. So that's the other thing you got to keep in mind. Track individual performances. See who generally gains the most points at their role. Try to play them if you can. And now let's go back to the in-game and talk about the game multipliers a little bit. So this kind of comes down to what the player cards actually do. You've got your basic cards, which don't give you any bonuses, but running the cards will give you their points for the day. And you've got silvers, which you get in regular player card packs. And those give you some bonuses. So generally what the bonuses do is they take those stats that you've gained on the fantasy tracking site and they multiply their effectiveness. So what this means is that some of the stats are good and some of the stats are bad. So my Jerax card, for example, I get 10% more death points, which is not bad on a support. I get 20% more creep score, which is pretty terrible. And I got 15% runes grab. So let's go compare this with what we were just looking at. Let's go take a look at Jerax and see what he's got. So that was 20% creep score. So that means my 0.2 points is going to be maximized or increased by 20%, which is 0.04 points. If you look at that according to their average daily, it's nothing. So 20% for creep score, pretty much across the board. This is supports, obviously, so it's slightly wrong. Let's go back to average score. But if you look at the highest creep score gainer, it's Sumail at 1.4. So if I have 20% creep score on Sumail, that gives me 0.28 points extra per match on average. It's not bad, but on pretty much anybody but cores, it's generally a worthless stat because those players aren't going to get a lot of last hits. So I can use that information to think, hey, it's not really worth it for me to have a Jerax card that gives creep score. So if I get 2 Jerax cards that are silver and I'm comparing the two, I will look at creep score and think that's irrelevant. I will look at runes grabbed and think, hey, that's pretty good actually. Because if we hop back to the other screen really quick and we go back to roll and we find Jerax and we think, how many times did he grab runes? Runes grabbed is over here, jump down to Jerax. 1.8 runes per game. And I believe our stat was, let me take a look, it was 15%. So we can take this 1.8, multiply it by 15, which is 0.18, it's 0.27. So I'm getting approximately 0.27 extra points per game from runes grabbed on Jerax, which is not amazing, but it's okay because that's on average his highest stat except for stuns. Apparently stuns is very good across the board for Jerax because he plays a lot of Earth Spirit, stuff like that. Monkey King maybe. So stuns is actually very good for Jerax. So if I get another Jerax card, I'll make that decision based on that. Deaths is not bad either because it ends up giving him 1.5 points on average per game. So I would say this card is kind of okay, but not great. So when you're opening packs, the most important thing to do then is to compare what you're getting newly with what you had before. So for Febby, this is my first silver, so I'm not going to dust this card. And for support, I would say GPM is awful. Camp Stacked is kind of bad if I'm not mistaken. I'm just going to quickly double check. Camp Stacked for supports is somewhere between like 0 and 1. So Camp Stacked, this is pretty much a shit card, but it's better than my blue one, so I'll keep it. Okay. For GH, let's compare this to what I had before. The previous one I kept had deaths and stuns, which is quite valuable. And if I very briefly take a look at the other site, what was that? GH. So I'm looking for Liquid. GH is not going to show on the first page. Let's see where he has on the second page. Okay, stuns. That's actually one of his biggest stats, other than he's actually got pretty good stats. It's not terrible. He's got a lot of stats within small categories. He's got a lot of wards placed, team fight, runes grabbed, and stuns. So if I have a runes grabbed and stuns card for GH, that's actually quite good. And I've got runes grabbed and stuns. It's only 5% for runes grabbed and 20% for stuns, but it's not too bad. And his deaths is not very good. It's 0.8, probably because he plays a lot of Wisp, most likely. So that one's not bad, and this one's got Roshan kills, camp fights, and Roshan kills, team fights, camp stack. This one kind of sucks because camp stacked is not very valuable, so I'm going to recycle that one. And then as you gain these points, you'll use it to buy more packs. I'm just going to do a couple more examples, for example, just to set some demonstration. This is the new one I just got. Kills, deaths, Roshan kills, team fights, runes grabbed. Team fights okay, but it's only a 5. Roshan kills, these numbers are all random, by the way. That loud noise is my dog chewing on her elk antler. I'm sorry about that. Kills, deaths is okay. I would prefer it if it was kills more than deaths myself. Roshan kills is okay. It would give me 0.25 extra fantasy points for every time he kills Roshan. Runes grabbed is 10. These are kind of weak, especially because Roshan kills is rare. It won't happen more than 3 times a game. He might not be the one that gets the last hit, and he might lose and therefore get no Roshan kills. So I think that one kind of sucks. This one, though, is kills 10%, which is not bad. GPM is pretty much weak. Roshan kills is kind of bad. You know, this card kind of sucks too, in my opinion. Let's get a little bit more deep into the numbers, though, because I want to make sure that I'm making the right choice in such a small instance. So I'm going to go back here, go to core. We're going to go find mid one. So he gets a lot of kills. He's got actually really good stats across the board, so he might be worth running, because keep in mind, Abed had like... Tango, please, not on the wall. He has a lot of stats on average. I think mid one was, I believe, 19 on average. Oh, I'm sorry, we weren't searching by total score. Yeah, mid one's actually 5th best in the game for average stats. So let's take a look. He's got pretty good runes grabbed, pretty good team fight, very good tower kills, and very good kills. So for mid one, I'd prefer to have kills, tower kills, runes grabbed, and team fight. So we'll hop back into the game. Not really Roshan. I think Roshan gives us 0.3 per game, which is very little. So Roshan's kind of bad. Team fight, runes grabbed. I don't know. These are both a little bit weak, I dare say. They both kind of suck, surprisingly, despite being golds. Kills, deaths, Roshan, team fight, runes. Ugh. Sometimes you just get bad ones. I'm going to ignore GPM because I think it's pretty much worthless. It's 1.3. It's not awful. It's better than camps, Roshan. Basically, we should probably ignore Roshan, Camp Stacked, and First Blood. Those are all terrible. Unless you get lucky. You could get lucky. I could get this First Blood one for 10% and it gives me 0.4 points, but you never really know. So to double check again, just to remind myself. Roshan kills is bad. Wards placed, Camp Stacked, First Blood. Roshan, wards placed, First Blood, Camp Stacked. So these 3 are pretty much worthless. So it's just kills and GPM. GPM is also kind of bad. And the kills is 10%, which is not bad. It's 0.3 points. Like most of these kind of just suck. I think I'm going to go with this one because it has more that I want. So I'll recycle the old one. So that was an upgrade. All right, boom, 5 more points. All right, so now that you know how percentages work, what you get for each score, it's time to figure out which players you actually put on your days. So you already know about all those other things. You can check to see who has the highest scoring on average. And the most important thing now is to think who actually plays on every day. Because not every team will play the same amount of matches every day. And that's especially the case in the main event, where teams might play 1 day, skip 2 days, play on the third play date, and move on. And obviously, as teams go all the way towards the end, not everybody's playing, so it's important to stay up to date and make sure that you submit your fantasy rosters in the morning before the matches start. So first day, easiest way to check who plays the most matches is to go on Liquipedia. This is generally your best place to look to see how the tournament is going. The way that the tournament for group stage of TI7 is working is that there's 2 groups and they play each other once and they play BO2, so they play 2 matches. So OG will play all of these teams twice each. In BO2s, if you get 2 wins, you get 2 points. If you get 1 win, you get 1 point. If you get 0 wins, you get 0 points for that match. And the teams that have the best performances will seed better into the double elimination final bracket. So that's how the matches work, but let's take a look at the schedule. You can look at the schedule on Liquipedia here by checking to see which series are played. There's 4 matches at each moment. So that means there's 5 sets of games being played on day 1, and it's most likely the case for all the other days as well until you get close to the end. But this might seem a little overwhelming because you have to look and count 1 EG logo, 2 EG logos, 3 EG logos. So I found this really nice Reddit post that came out in the last day that has a lot of really good information. And this confirms, at least according to this post, because I was a little unsure about this, is that the teams that play the most are listed here. So that means these 6 teams should play the most matches. So let's take a look at EG and just confirm some of these things. I guess it proves it here. So all of these 6 teams play 3 matches on day 1. That means they will play a total of 6 matches, whereas teams that are not on this list will play less than 6 matches. And that means that you pretty much have to pick fantasy from one of these 6 teams, because if you don't and you pick a team that only plays 2 sets or 4 matches, that means you will get 2/3 of the possible fantasy points as a player that plays on any of these 6. So that is your absolute minimum, okay, guys? You should reference this Reddit post. You can easily search for it probably, or you can look at the URL at the top of the screen. Tell you what, I'll put links to all of these things in the drop-down box. You can find them easily. Pick teams and pick players from one of these 6 teams that you think will score the best. So, for example, I think Abed is going to probably score the highest fantasy again, but he doesn't play 3 matches day 1. So I'm not going to pick Abed. I'm probably going to pick either Mid1, Sumail, maybe Miracle. You also want to pick teams that you think are going to win the most, because teams that lose will not get as many points. Less kills, more deaths, less tower kills, all that good stuff. So you want to pick the teams that are more likely to win. And right now it's kind of sorted like that. I think EG, Liquid, and Secret will all do pretty well, but you can also look at the EG game and the Liquid game and realize they actually play each other. So that means I may not want to pick one of these guys because I'm not sure how this game is going to go. But if I look at Secret, for example, I can reasonably expect that they will beat Empire. I think they're definitely going to beat Infamous, and I think they will beat LGD. So Secret might be the easiest pick to do because I expect them to win this match 2-0, maybe this one 2-0, and probably this one 2-0 as well. Now, if I'm wrong and somebody picks EG and EG goes 6-0 for their day, then I'm going to get less fantasy points on day 1. But that's basically what the gamble goes down to. If I pick Sumail and Arteezy actually gets the most points for day 1, then that person gets more points. And then it's also multiplied by the factors, of course. If my Arteezy card's not as good as somebody else's, then I will get slightly less points. But really, it doesn't matter that much because the way that the fantasy tracker works and the way that individual performances go, picking the right hero is far more important than it is for their overall average. Like, for example, main event day 4, Ana got the most points, but the day before it was Sumail, and he got a difference of like 10 points difference. So the percentages usually only move you by a couple points. So if I pick the best player, let's say somebody picks Ana and they have a really good gold card and it pushes them up to 50 points or something like that, and I pick Sumail and I have a blue card, I'll still get more points than them because I picked the better card. So there's a lot of big swings. Like Ana got a disgusting amount of points on day 2. He got 96 points, and next closest was Sumail. So if you didn't pick Ana, you got super outmatched day 1. Same over here, 82.9 points on Burning versus 64.9, because it looks like Invictus Gaming did really well on day 1, for example. So you can kind of track how things are going. Keep tuned to this website to check like TI7 once it comes out. It'll track who did the best each day. You can use that information to try to find out why, who did the best, and then adjust it. So remember, the important things are who's playing the most games, which players are getting the most points on average and doing the best for the day, which supports are placing the most awards, and ideally, there's other important things like, is your hero a tower pusher? Because you'll get more points for killing towers if you're like a Terrorblade, for example, than a Queen of Pain, for example. So that's all the stuff to keep in mind. And from there, you can just do your best with fantasy. For me, based on this site, I will probably pick, like I said, maybe Secret. I might go half and half. I might pick 1 Secret player, 1 EG player. It's probably better for me to pick 2 mids than it is for me to pick a mid and a carry, unless a carry on average scores really well. We don't necessarily know yet because, again, teams have changed, strats are different, the meta is different, everything changes. So this is always going to be a little bit of a learning process as you go through and end up picking your heroes for every single day. So I really recommend sticking with it and trying it out. I think fantasy is a lot of fun. It makes watching the games more fun, and it's a little bit of extra homework to do on the sidelines to to enjoy the game. So I can promise you guys that for the first 3 days of group stage, I will probably come out and tell you my predictions, or at least give you a little analysis. But I'm leaving to head to TI on the 5th, and then I'm going to be most likely busy during the main event doing Weatherman stuff. So I probably won't be able to do videos here because I'm going to be working long days, but there's a small chance that I'll do really ghetto versions in my hotel room on the laptop, but no promises. So that is my total analysis. Hopefully you guys understood, and if you guys are completely confused, I really hope this helped, because I recommend tuning in. You can get global top 100 on the leaderboards. You can track between your friends. It's really fun. I really recommend playing, and anybody that has a compendium should be able to do so and have enough player cards where they don't have to spend money to do it anyways. So I don't even know if you can buy player cards. Oh, sure. I just got 2 cards. Cool. Or 2 deaths. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day. Bye. We know that the dresses, the matches are best of 2.